Today I wanted to talk about a particular visit in Africa, and obviously, with my passion for wildlife and wildlife conservation, Africa is definitely one of my happy places, and I'm very lucky to have been able to visit a number of different countries in Africa and seen a lot of wildlife, and I've got friends there as well, friends in different parts of the country. So I feel very privileged to have been able to have that time. And as some of you may know, if you've been listening to the podcast series, I climbed Kilimanjaro back in 2017, and that was, I think I mentioned, partly to raise money for UNICEF Australia, but also because I really needed an adventure. I was getting really bogged down in work and the work I was doing at the time, and it was just not really working for me. So I think it's really healthy to have an adventure every now and again. Keeps us young. So I wanted to talk about the Ngorongoro crater, which I struggle with, and I probably absolutely mauled the pronunciation anyway, because it's just a really special place in Tanzania, and it's not far from Kilimanjaro. It's a few hours drive, and in case you're not aware of exactly where these places are, Kilimanjaro is almost on the border between Tanzania on the southern border and Kenya on the northern border, and the Ngorongoro crater conservation area, which is about 8,000 square kilometers, which is about 3,000 square miles. It's a huge area, is a few hours drive to, broadly speaking, the southwest. That's extremely rough, but it gives you an idea anyway of the kind of geography of what I'm talking about. And the crater is exactly that. It's the remains, it's the caldera of a huge volcano that we believe was last active somewhere between 2 and 3 million years ago. And the caldera is basically, it's like the cone, or the it's more of a cauldron. Caldera means cauldron, and it's that kind of thing, if you imagine that sort of a shape. And the caldera itself is over 600 meters deep. That's 2,000 feet. The area of it at floor level is 260 square kilometers, about 100 square miles. There's even a lake in it. So it's quite an amazing area. The floor of the crater is about 1,800 meters above sea level. So that's just under 6,000 feet above mean sea level. So it's, not at sea level or anything like that, but it's just an amazing environment. And funny enough, one of the tie-ins with the trip to Kilimanjaro, other than it was part of this extension I did after completing the climb, that I went to visit the crater, was that when I was buying my walking boots, which obviously were very important, a very important bit of kit for the Kilimanjaro climb, the guy who was helping me at this sort of specialist store in Sydney, he was a scientist. He was a natural botanist. I'm not sure that's right, but he was studying animals. I think botany is more plants, but you're welcome to write in and correct me, which might be a long message. But he spent a few months actually doing work for, I don't know if it's his degree, doctorate, whatever he was doing, in the crater itself. So that was just brilliant. So aside from getting my boots sorted out, we also had a really good chat about what to see there. And it is one of those places where, if you can imagine, pretty much all of the animals you would expect to see in Central Africa like that, they're in the crater. And it's sort of like this unique environment, though, because you do have to go down the crater side to get into it. And it's sort of cut off from everywhere else. So it's a little bit like The Land That Time Forgot, if you remember that movie or the book by Edgar Rice Burroughs. But it's that sort of an environment, so it's an amazing place. And when we drove down there, I had a guide and driver, and there was another person with me. We went down there and we entered the World Heritage Site, because the region is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And there's a lookout where you can stand and look over the crater. Now, I did take some photographs, but I always struggle with these sort of huge landscapes, because even doing your best as a photographer, I personally find that it's I don't think you can truly get across how big these places are unless you took a whole sort of patchwork of photographs, stitched them all together, and just blew them up as this massive image that went across the whole wall. It's the only way to get any idea of the size and the space when you stand at a place like that, looking over this amazing crater. So that's Ngorongoro crater. Now, when we went down, so we actually set up camp. We were using tents, and I think we were at one of the Simba campsites. I forget now the campsite, but there are little campsites dotted around just on the rim of the crater, just back off the rim of the crater. And we were in tents, and so with the tents, I'll just say this while I think of it. You have a kind of standard ablutions blocks for toilets and showers and all that kind of stuff, and then you set up your tent, and when you need to use the bathroom, you wander across. Well, we were kind of the other side. It was like a big field, really, and we were the other side of the field from where these blocks were. So naturally, I had to get up in the middle of the night and wander off, and I'm trying not to trip over the tent ropes. So I'm sort of navigating my way, and ideally back to my own tent rather than surprise somebody else in the middle of the night. And that was all good. But when I got up in the morning, and it was quite cold up there actually, and we were there in August, I think it was. It was actually quite cold first thing in the morning. And walking back across to the toilet block, there was an awful lot of sort of animal dung and tracks and spore, basically. And so it obviously been quite a busy night. And I felt quite thankful I hadn't bumped into anything I wasn't expecting while I was out, having that little midnight walk or whatever you do. So anyway, that was the campsite. And that's pretty standard. If you are thinking about going to Africa, first of all, I thoroughly recommend it. It's just such an amazing and wonderful place. But there are many ways you can go. So you can do the tent thing, you can do the hotel thing, you can go to lodges. There are all these kind of things. So it really is up to you what you do. Well, ours was fairly basic, but you can go glamping, as they call it. So many things you can do, but definitely recommend it. So back in the crater, though, it's just this amazing environment. There's even a little lake in there, and definitely if you've looked at my fine art prints, there's a picture. I think I called it sisters, but it's two lionesses kind of wrestling on a nice green bit of ground. In fact, it was next to a bit of water from memory, and that was taken in the crater. These two lionesses were just chilling out, having a lot of fun, and just enjoying the sunshine. In the afternoon we were there. I also took a lot of pictures of little baboons. Saw a rhino from a long way off. Saw some elephant. We actually saw elephant. When we were standing on the rim. We could just make them out walking through, down in the crater. They're obviously the lions are there, so there are predators there, and pretty much any of the animals you would expect to see in Africa, in that part of Africa, are down in the crater. So it is one of the tourist places to go. It's quite a unique environment, so if you do have that opportunity, I would definitely recommend it. And that's kind of one part of what I wanted to just really have a chat about in this podcast. Now, the other place is a place that's really held my imagination, definitely since my early 20s, when I started reading about this stuff. And that's the anthropology aspect, because not far from the crater, and I believe it's still in the Ngorongoro conservation area, is Olduvai Gorge or Olduvai Gorge. Probably absolutely mauled those pronunciations as well. Now, if you've never heard of them, that's fine. But they were made famous in anthropological circles back in I think it was the 50s, maybe even earlier, by Richard Leakey and his wife, and then his son afterwards, who found the fossilized remains of very early hominids. Now, if you don't know what a hominid is, that's fine. They're basically small apes, maybe a metre or so high. They vary depending on the species, but they walk upright. So if you like, they're somewhere between us, Homo sapiens, and chimpanzees. So they're quite small, but their face would look more like a chimpanzee's face, but they do walk up on two legs. And so in that respect, they look more like us. And human evolution, when I was at school in the sort of 60s and 70s, it kind of was a straight line really from this sort of gibbon-looking thing through a nice little drawing up to us. But the truth is that the evolution of great apes, these primates that eventually resulted in us, is more like a bush with all these little branches going off and then going nowhere in the end. And hominids are kind of lower down in that bush to where we are. And there were quite a few different species of hominid. And some of them originated in this area, Olduvai Gorge. And certainly, I don't know what the story is now because it tends to change. Every few years, another discovery is made and then our understanding of our own evolution changes. But certainly for a while, Olduvai Gorge was seen as ground zero for us, basically. Eventually Homo sapiens evolved either there or in that area. And it's certainly still believed, I think, that Homo sapiens did evolve in that area, in the African savanna somewhere. Again, there are different theories going around at the moment. There's sort of two main theories that I'm aware of. One is that we all evolved out of one common ancestor, and all the different races that we have and different types of people, so Caucasians, Asians, whatever, all came out of a common ancestor. Or there's another one that proposes that some of the more distinct looking people actually evolved separately. Who knows? There's not enough evidence yet that's been found to really make one theory or the other the absolute history of us as creatures evolving. But nonetheless, Olduvai Gorge does hold a very important place in that particular area. And the interesting thing about that in the Ngorongoro crater is that the caldera that dates back certainly around 3 million years, when the caldera was basically a volcano, and the top part just collapsed into this sort of made this sort of cauldron shape, which is what you've got with the crater. So that happened 2 to 3 million years ago, not clear, somewhere in that range, and certainly very close to that time. And it's certainly thought to be about 3 million years ago. There were hominids in that area, in Olduvai Gorge. They would have been in the crater as well as the Serengeti. Now, climate change that we're experiencing isn't something new. Climate varies all the time, and those areas are probably a bit different when those guys were around, but nonetheless, it's quite an interesting area. So, I took the opportunity to go because there's a really good visitor centre there. If you do go, it's really interesting. It's not very big, but it's very interesting. And then you get to stand and look over the Olduvai Gorge as well. So that's another place. And again, it's just, for me, it's a question of standing there, and I like to just stand there for a moment, no camera, just sort of try and breathe in these places and connect with them in some way, because there's such amazing history that connects directly to us in these areas. So if you do get the chance to go to Tanzania, which is a beautiful country, I do thoroughly recommend it. I do recommend going to the crater. I do recommend going to Olduvai Gorge if you can, as well, and just seeing that and seeing what the latest thoughts are. And that was pretty much it. As I say, there are one or two pictures. I'm just trying to remember what else is in the collections specifically from the crater, but I do definitely remember the two lionesses have a bit of a wrestling match. So that's definitely there. Again, from a photography standpoint, as this is sort of broadly speaking a photography blog, I was using my standard gear. So my go-to setup is these days, the Canon EOS 5DS for anything that isn't moving really fast. If I need to do high-speed bursts, I've also got a Canon EOS 7D Mark II, which is it's sort of a backup body, but it's much, much faster. It's not full frame, that's crop sensor. So the EOS 5DS is full frame, which is why I like it. And it produces these really big images, which is why I like it for fine art. And certainly in Africa, I didn't find anything, I didn't see anything that would have needed a high burst speed. The only thing I can think of is something like a cheetah chasing down a prey animal. That's where you do need to have a good burst speed. But yeah, for general pictures in the gorge, it was great. And also generally take a wide angle with me as well to try and get in some of these wide angle kind of vistas. But another thing you can use, quite frankly, and it doesn't cost you anything because you're probably going to have it with you anyway, is to use your smartphone. And most of them these days have a panorama mode, And if you're not familiar with it, just go and have a look at your camera setting on your phone and just look at where they are. So on my old iPhone, when I go into the camera, there's the sort of shutter release button, round circular button at the bottom. But just above that, there are various options. And if you kind of slide them sort of left or to the right, you'll see the different options. And have a look at panorama. If you've seen some of the little video tips I give, I show you how to do panorama. So that's why I'm thinking of that one. But it's very simple to do. And it's quite a cool way of getting in a panoramic shot, particularly something like the crater, because everything's far away. So you're not going to get that distortion. If you do a panorama of something and something is close to you, it will tend to distort. As you bring the lens closer to that particular object, it will get bigger in the image and then it'll get smaller again. So you end up with this funny distortion in the final picture. But something like Olduvai Gorge, I've also been to the Rift Valley in Kenya. If you take pictures of those sort of lookouts, use your panorama mode because you're likely to get as good a result, frankly, as you're probably going to get in many cameras without doing a particular setup that you can do, which is another way of producing that kind of panorama. But to do that, it's a case of taking a lot of photographs and stitching them together. So there you go. This is so it's a slightly shorter podcast than usual, but I hope you found that interesting and not just me waffling on about it. But there are two things that I'm really interested in and passionate about. Well, three things, I guess: conservation being a huge part of it, but wildlife, and then anthropology as well. So not only understanding the animals that are around today, but also understanding where we came from as a species of animal, if you like, and also how we evolved and maybe what kind of animals would have been around 2 to 3 million years ago, because a lot of the animals we take for granted now were also not around when those hominids were walking those particular areas, the crater or the gorge, or wherever we might walk today. It was a completely different landscape populated by completely different animals when you step back through time, 1, 2, 3 million years. It's quite a different experience. So there you go. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it interesting, and I will speak to you again in another podcast. Bye for now. Oh, and one thing just before you go, please take a look at the 2026 wildlife calendar. That's available now. It's on the website. There's a link below the description of this podcast episode. So please take a look, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye now.